go.
I know you won't. Okay, we're going to do it all over again.
Okay.
Take it from the top. We'll wait till it gets down there.
Yeah.
We'll be a good and warmed up by then. Then I'll have to pee.
No, right? Timing.
It's the beauty of midlife, you know?
Catherine Grace O'Connell.
Welcome to Mastering Modern Midlife. I'm Catherine Grace O'Connell, and I am so honored to introduce my guest today. Keele Burgin is an entrepreneur, an activist, a mother of three, a filmmaker, and also the author of an amazing book called Wholly Unraveled. It is a journey, a memoir of self-discovery. So welcome to the show, Keele. I cannot tell you how excited I am to share your story and this brilliant book.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you. And to make this happen on, such short notice, just a few days ago, and you whipped the book to me, and yes. I couldn't put it down.
Oh, well, thank you.
Truly, I love to read anyway, but your story is so crazy compelling, and the journey where you came from to where you are today, which we're going to get into. And the book doesn't start actually at the beginning. I'm just going to read a little, I know you read a lot on the things. I'm just going to read this just to open it up because it's really profound how you start it. The only food I had was the 3 pieces of brown bread, which tasted of the outdoor oven where they had been made, and a cookie I'd stolen. I had 22 hours before I could leave, and I needed to make 1 stolen cookie, 2 cigarettes, some stale brown bread, and a half gallon of water go the distance with me. I had to get the wood stove going, which meant I needed to force myself to go out into the blizzard to collect wood before it got dark so I wouldn't freeze to death. Tell a little bit more, but really that's really the middle of the story, or at least the end of your childhood traumatic story. So let's go back to the beginning, because then you really get into this journey of self-discovery, but a journey that was a pretty wild and crazy journey, beginning with growing up in what you refer to as a cult and handmaids, and all these people know about things right now. But you didn't even actually realize that you were in a cult, in a kind of growing up the way other people were not necessarily growing up. So let's start there. What was that like for you?
Well, I think we all grow up in our own normal, whatever that is. I do remember looking at other families and thinking, I wonder what it would be like to live there instead of where I lived. One of my favorite pastimes, I lived right across the street from the ocean, and I used to go hide under the boardwalk, and I would listen to people's stories as they walked the boardwalk. And I would just try to put myself there and say, oh, it would be lovely to live there or be in that family, because mine was so unsafe. And so I don't think you realize that you're just growing up. I was just a kid. It's all I knew. But I do have a sense of, I knew that inside something was wrong, right? Yeah.
In the book, when you're going back, that's something that really popped out for me, was there was a huge awareness of the inner world. You talk about like the inner voice screaming and this torment that was going inside. But is that more a midlife woman looking back, reflecting, than actually having an awareness of this sort of tormented inner world at the time?
Right. Well, that came through a lot of trauma therapy, is that I realized how much I had actually been through, because I didn't realize that. What I was doing, there's 3 parts of the book. There's the childhood, and then there's kind of this, I was chasing adrenaline. I was chasing some kind of something. My dad had put so many boundaries on me and so much restriction that when I finally was free in my college and 20s, I was chasing that boundary. I was chasing someone to try to say, you're going off the rails here. But I didn't get that. I had to give that to myself, which is the third part.
Your father, the way you describe him, was very narcissistic, and he was the head of a pretty powerful cult that was similar. I actually just watched The Handmaid's tale for the first time, I didn't even know what that meant, to be honest. So what was that like for you to have a father like that? Clearly you knew something wasn't right. You were never quite comfortable, couldn't really be at home in your own body. So what was that like for you?
Petrifying, I guess. My dad, that we had certain things we had to do. Like when he got home, we all had to run down the stairs and stand in line and greet him. And, if you weren't there, it was big trouble. And the Handmaids, it's just, I didn't watch that show. My girlfriends say, don't skip that one, Keele. You probably don't need to watch that one. But my mom and all the wives were called handmaids of the Lord. And so they had, I talk about it in the book, but I remember viscerally feeling things being sucked away from me, like I would never be able to experience. My mom couldn't dye her hair or highlight her hair. She couldn't wear certain outfits. She always had to wear prairie skirts, down to the ankles a lot. She was able to wear pants some. And I remember when they told me who I was going to have to marry, and it was horrifying because I didn't like that boy, and I was 12 or 10, and they were saying, this is who you're going to marry. So it was, and again, I didn't know any differently, but my dad was a scary figure. I could hear him coming and going, and not that I can be grateful for those experiences, but it did give me a sense of, I have an intense intuition, and I'm really grateful for that. And it's because I had to be so alert when I was young to make sure that
PTSD. Yeah.
Right. So
that's like the prey animal.
Yeah.
Wow. So you talked to about, clearly there's like a string of trauma, and you don't really seem to know much about your grandmother, who was your mother's mother, I believe, which there's some incredible visceral moments in there when you're observing your grandmother and taking the wig off and pin by pin and really watching her, but wanting to know about her. So tell me about her, and that sort of has left you with many questions as to what happened and why is my mom not really a mom?
Right. And that took me a long time to figure out why. But my mom, and I have empathy for my mom. I just lost her. She just passed in December. But my mom didn't have a mom, really, because the grandmother you're talking about, she was hospitalized at 7 when my mom was 7. And she was in that hospital for 7 years, and my mom didn't see her. And, back then, now it would be, let's go to a psychiatrist, let's go to therapy, maybe put on an antidepressant for a little while or an anxiety or something, which they didn't do that. They did shock treatments for her. So for 7 years, my mom was parenting herself, really. I mean, she had her dad and her brother, but all of the laundry and the cooking and the cleaning, it all fell to my mom. So my grandmother was just a character in my life because she didn't really like me. She really liked 2 of my sisters. So they got a lot more of the attention, but I was actually grateful I didn't get the attention because she kind of scared me. But I'll never forget her taking the wig off, because I talk about how that just feels like that was everything I wanted to know was tied up in that hair. She would wear a wig, but she had this long, beautiful white gray hair. And every night she would take her wig off, and I would hide behind the curtains and I would watch her take it off. And I would just wish that she would tell me the stories. And she had a story with every bobby pin. It felt like she took a bobby pin out and she looked at it and she would place it in the bowl. And those were the story. I wanted to hear what her story was. And that probably started this lifelong, for me, a lifelong journey of wanting to hear women's stories, because they unite us. They make us all feel like we can do this thing called life together if you share your stories. And for me, it's about, let's share the stories that you don't want to say out loud, because those are the ones that hold the shame and the guilt and the fear. And when we can say them out loud, there's just this release, this rush, this healing, this self-worth and self-love that we can get from telling our stories out loud.
Well, there's a real irony in that, because ultimately, in that first scene that we talked about, you walk out on your family, you run away, and you run away to a place where you're in silence. So, but in silence is where your story, for the first time, you could actually hear your own story and make sense of your own story. So tell us about that. Like, clearly there were some pretty traumatic moments in there that drove you to realize that you were saving your life. I mean, it was getting terrifying with the gun and the horse. I mean, there were so many scenes. I don't know what you want to share there. What ultimately led you to really flee, and then kind of a circular route, because you're fleeing a religious cult that is a pretty traumatic environment, but going to a place that actually is religious.
The irony of that is not lost on me. Right. Yes. Mm-hmm. So I left my family to go to college, really. And I never, I didn't go back very often. So I had several years where I was not taking care of myself. I was doing drugs. I had a horrific eating disorder, I just didn't eat. It was basically or Diet Coke and pretzels were a full meal for me for a long time. And one day I woke up and I had unfortunately done drugs the night before. I had to be resuscitated by the limo driver. And I was scared for the first time, I think. And I remember hearing the only priest I ever personally trusted was a priest that my dad had met and brought him to our house. His name was Archbishop Joseph Raya, and he was an Archbishop of Galilee. And I remembered in that moment, waking up on the grass, I remembered him saying, all there is love, love. And so I knew he lived in Canada. And so I hitchhiked there, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I got there and I found out everything was done in silence. We had to shear sheep and milk cows, and I had to stick my hand down chicken gullets and get the eggs from down below. I had to wash handkerchiefs, and I mean, it was a beautiful community of love. But anything we ate or anything we did had to be done there, and we did it in silence, except for meals we spoke. And it was ironic that it was a Catholic cult, and here it was, this Catholic commune, another Catholic commune. It's a lay apostolate, is what they call it, lay people who live apostolically, was so full of love, and they just embraced me. They let me fall apart. They let me try to figure out what happened to me, and they let me try to fall in love with myself. And it is a beautiful place. I'm so grateful for it. And the silence piece is also interesting. I wrote a piece, I'm doing a speech right now on the power and the price of silence. And there's a price to silence, to staying silent. And that was my childhood. It took me decades to find my voice because I was silenced in my childhood. But the power of silence, to be silent for that year where I didn't speak much, there's such power in that because I got to go inside and figure out who I was. So silence can be duplicitous in that. And you can get beautiful things, and you can also pay a price.
Well, the first kind of silence was a repression that was different, where they're holding you back. And the second one really is via choice, not that you necessarily knew exactly what you were going into, but once you're there, I mean, that's the way you describe your book. I find it really hard to believe that you were not a writer and that you put it together on sticky notes. And Chris, that your gift for you really bring your audience there. You can feel everything, see everything when you're at these tables and it's freezing cold outside, and here's your first moment meeting this MK, and how you're like this, and by the end you guys are like this, and really understanding, because it's a whole bunch of wounded souls there, right? All in silence. Ultimately, that's the ultimate gift, where they're each finding themselves and seeing themselves. Like, you could see that the others really understood you. Even when you were like this, they understood you. And I watched you come full circle and inside of yourself.
I really did. We once a week, I would walk at sometimes up to 5 miles. And this is Northern Ontario, Canada. It's cold like you can't imagine. I mean, the snow was taller than me. It was like, if you looked from the top, it looked like an anthill cut, with the snow. And I would hike and I would go to a place they called Pustinia. And it was a tiny little cabin, which is where I start the book. And I was alone for 24 hours. And that can be scary when when you don't know who you are, to be alone for 24 hours. And um, it was life-giving. It was amazing. But it was also very, very difficult. I mean, I stayed there for 2 weeks at first, and Archbishop Raya wasn't even there. And I stayed, and then I stole a car and I left because I was
I remember that scene. Yeah, you're a brave little one. Quite the badass.
Well, I don't know if it's brave or scared. I was like, I
at the time. Is that when you went to see Logan? Is that correct? Is that the time you went? And so there's some wonderful love stories in there, and I think even in one of your interviews, you guys will have to read the book to really find out more about Logan. I'm sure you'll share some right now, but you guys actually met up later. So this is you got in the car, you went to see this man that really the first person who really loved you, but you weren't ready for it. But you did go and see him, and then you went right back. So tell me about that, because it wasn't really clear, except that there was something still terrifying. You obviously were not ready to let him in and really let him know the true story.
That's right. I wasn't ready to tell myself the true story. And so I couldn't tell anyone else the story. I didn't understand how wounded I was. I didn't understand trauma at all in my 20s and what it can do to you. You know, women and men now, we have so much more information about trauma and how it affects us. But I didn't know. I was just trying to put one foot in front of the other without any idea of really how. So when I stole the car, I thought, I can go back to him and he'll take care of me. And he would have. But I would never have found myself. I would never have had the self-worth that staying there for a year gave me. And I'm so grateful for Logan. And I've seen him since the book came out, and it was wonderful to catch up. And we had like a 4-hour lunch where I really got to make an amend to him, because I was hurting myself, but in the process, I was hurting others. And so we really had a heartfelt, he was sorry he didn't know how to help me, and I was sorry that I had hurt him. And so it's beautiful to come in our midlife, to come full circle to these stories and to be able to go back to someone and really make an amend for something I did wrong and have that connection.
The beauty of the circle. And we're going to finish this show at the end, talk about tribes, because it seems like circles are a theme for you, things coming full circle and the power of circles. But one thing that we, not to say we haven't skipped over, we haven't dived into, you had some pretty serious traumas that really did force you out of, your childhood home. And you had one, I think, obviously you struggled with immensely, understandably. You were raped pretty brutally, and your mother knew, and it was as though it never happened. So can we talk about that, what that was like for you, and how, have you ever healed it? Clearly, this was a whole process of diving into it and sharing this story that was so crazy, painful, and really confusing for you about being with a man after that.
Yes, I think sexual abuse is a really difficult, an important topic for us to talk about, but difficult to talk about. And it was really important to me because there are so many victims of sexual assault. It was so important to me how I told that story. And the way I had to do it was almost a reliving of it, which was awful. But I took the picture of the man who did it to me and I put it on my computer screen and I wrote that part of my life. And it was so difficult. But I can tell you that after it was over and with a lot of therapy, I really came to forgive myself because I thought it was my fault. And sexual assault is never the victim's fault. It is absolutely a violent crime. And so being able to write about it so truthfully and relive it that way was so cathartic. And I hope, my great, great hope is that it helps other women come forward and say, that happened to me too. And it's interesting to me that it was a lot harder for me to forgive my mom than it was to forgive my perpetrator, because I was dropped off and it was horrible. It had just happened. And my mom put me in a bath and left me there, really. And I really thought maybe I just don't want to be here anymore. And it's still difficult. She left the room and came back with a warm Sprite and just put it on the side of the bathtub. And I thought my life was over at that point. I didn't have a lot of hope. And so I really want anyone who's been through trauma to have hope that on the other side of trauma is a beautiful life, a beautiful life. I am in love with my life. And it's because I am a survivor. I'm not crazy about the word survivor, but I love resilient. I am resilient. And I have taken the trauma that's happened to me, and I've tried to take it and make it into something beautiful. And I think that's an important thing for all of us to try to do. All of our trials and tribulations, we should try to make them into something beautiful and go help someone with that.
Well, you did. I mean, you did an incredible job in sharing the story. And I mean, that was a brutal storytelling of what happened to you. You were so young. You were so damaged, physically damaged by the experience. And the doctor is sharing what to your mother, what had happened, and really telling her that you were brutally assaulted. And it was horrific to listen and, listen. I felt like I was literally listening to you there. But again, let's go full circle here. At the end of your time at Madonna, you had a spiritual director, and his name was Father Jim, I believe. And you opened up finally about this experience. And oh my God, it was so crazy, re-traumatizing. But by the same token, I felt like you were in a place where you knew, that's not my stuff.
Correct.
So can we share that moment and what that was like for you?
Sure. I finally got the courage to speak to someone about the rape. It had been inside of me creating a bonfire and just terrible volcano. And I finally said it, and the response from the priest was an absolution of sin. He was absolving me from my sin. And I finally found my voice in that moment and said, "You're absolving me? You've got the wrong person here." And I have to give that gift that I felt loved there. So I was able to finally have my voice. And I had come up with an essence statement, I call it, of who I was, who I really truly am in my heart. And that helped too. And it also helped me to say, there's the Catholic Church, there's different religions, all of this. It's the individuals that do wrong, right? And here was this priest who had his own wounds and his own trauma and his own misbeliefs. And yet I didn't have to take his on. I got to stand in my own power of my own beliefs. I know that I was a victim of that violent crime, not the perpetrator. And it was an MK in the book too. She's a rock star, right? She was outside that door listening. And I think I knew that deep down. And I think that helped me to stand up for myself. Like we have to
feel her love and power holding you up. Because I remember I had my own eating disorders. You talk a lot. There's a relationship with food in there, or trying to find a healthy relationship with food where you're starving yourself, which we know is holding things back because we don't deserve it. Certainly anyone out there who's had eating disorders, and he uses that against you. It's so crazy, but you get into the mindset of them, victimizing the victim, as this priest is saying to you, these men, it's your fault for attracting them because what you put on weight and they find that attractive and sexy. And so it's your fault that you are attracting this. And it's amazing watching you and following that journey of healing, and you're in that place and the anger's rising up, but you're like, I'm done. This is yours. And I can walk away free from here.
And what a beautiful lesson for life, really. In so many moments we can say, I own who I am. I'm going to stay on my side of the street, and I'm not coming over there to yours. You own yours. And I want to say, I'm sorry that you went through a similar thing.
We have from sexual abuse. We have many similarities throughout our stories, of course, always different. I didn't have a religious cult, but I certainly grew up in that environment and had some very similar experiences and a lot of inner confusion. I really related to the inner torment, and no matter what women experience out there, like you say, we all have our own different journey, but we all have an inner torment and those voices inside that are so difficult.
Yeah, I gave a lecture at Bucknell last week, and it was interesting to talk to these younger women, right? And there were, and it was about storytelling, feminine philosophy and storytelling. And I said, why aren't you telling your story? And it was interesting why. It was what you just spoke about. They didn't either, there was inner torment, right? Or they didn't feel like it was bad enough, which is, that's one that I just want to say out loud, that trauma is trauma is trauma. All of our traumas, what's the worst for me may not be the worst for you, but it is all the same. If it hurts, you have the right to talk about it. And the other big one was they didn't feel they had enough story yet. And I love Flannery O'Connor because he said, if you haven't had a childhood, you have enough to write about for the rest of your life.
Isn't that the truth? I think that's so true. I think you had a brilliant interview with a woman who asked you something around trauma and like this comparison game. Okay, my trauma isn't as bad as your trauma, so I'm going to be quiet. But that doesn't help any of us, and we certainly can't. Trauma is trauma, and we experience trauma in different ways. It can be a car accident. It can be sexual abuse. But to us, we carry that inside of us until we're ready to bring it out, look at it, deal with it, heal it, and then go help others, right?
Right. We're not all, I think well, I should speak for myself. I was taught that women should compete, right? And that there are rungs on this ladder of competition. And, well, she's better at me at yoga, but I'm better at her than at running, or I'm better. And if we can just take the time and realize that those voices are not accurate, because dismantle that ladder and we can all be flat and help each other instead. You stand next to me, not above me or below me. Stand next to me and let's do this together. So that's what I appreciate about your work. So thank you for the work you're doing. It's so important.
Thank you. We also have a tribe. So we love our tribes here. But I do think if we go back to like childhood, and I'm not talking about traumatic moments in childhood, but for most of us as children, we're not competing with other children. We're out there playing in our own little world. And it's like, again, that full circle, you come back and you're getting back to that, back to who you really are, which is competition free, because it's about us, isn't it? I mean, the real thing, not this and not, I mean, I love pretty clothes. You love pretty clothes, but it's about this in there. And that's what we come back to at midlife.
Right. I think it's the word I love to use is essence. It's our essence. And for me, that is, I am Keele. I am worthy, powerful, connected, and sensual, experiencing life with abundance, laughter, and vulnerability. And I came up with that in my 20s, but it took me till my midlife to understand that. Even though I knew that they were in there, I knew those words were in there. They bubbled in me and I knew they were mine. But decades later is when I started saying, oh, I'm living them. I'm living the worth now. And I hope that through our midlives, we can give that to the younger generation so they don't have to wait so long to realize their worth, etc., or their essence.
I'm with you 110% on that. Midlife is all about not just finding your essence, but really connecting to that essence. And we're going to take a break and come right back and talk about that beautiful essence that we've both discovered. So we are back, and we're going to pick it up there from our essence. And what does our voice have to do with our essence? You talk a lot about finding your voice, but it's not just finding our voice, is it? There's more to it than that. And talk about the second part of voice, which is using our voice. And how does that help us discover our essence? And how does that essence get even deeper, or our, connection to our essence at midlife and beyond?
Yes. Oh my gosh, what a great question. I have watched women of all ages. I work in Guatemala and Vietnam on vocal empowerment for young women. And the Mayan women specifically, I've worked extensively with. And It is amazing to see them find it. So I'll say it by example. I go and we start a tribe of women down there, and they can't look you in the eye. They're in seventh grade when they start with us. We take them all the way through high school and beyond. And they can't look you in the eye when they first meet. And it's so sad because they have been pushed down so far. And then we do some vocal empowerment with them. We have them just practice using their voice. We have them looking in the eye and shake hands. We have them start to introduce themselves with not just how many siblings they have and if they're alive or dead, but who they are. Give us just one word even. And as they start to do that, 3 months will go by and then I go back. And next thing you know, they are looking me in the eye. They are telling their stories. And I think using their voice is so important. And it's the same for all of us. If I tell you the story of my trauma and you can relate to that, I get to validate my story and myself, and you can validate yours. And they start talking in their peers, and all of a sudden they're validated. Your story matters. Who you are in the world matters. We need you, Catherine. We need your story in the world because it's going to change lives for others. And so it's beautiful to watch. And I think it's all about the words out loud. Say it out loud. That thing you don't want to say.
Yeah, say that thing you don't want to say. You said a lot of things you didn't want to say and wrestled with them as they came out. And it's amazing how you can make something that was such a traumatic experience, but really come out on paper so prolific, so profound, so life-changing. And thank you really for bringing us along in that journey. So what I'm getting from that is it's like we find our voice, but it's keep turning up the volume and turning up the volume and turning up the volume because you turn the volume on your life and on parts of yourself. All these, it's connected, right? Because our voice isn't really up here. When I lost my voice too, and I had a little girl's voice, I still do to some extent, but you go deeper and deeper and deeper, and as you go deeper and deeper, you go deeper into parts of yourself, right?
Absolutely.
Sometimes,
how did you find your voice?
How did I find through this? It was literally losing myself, the whole near-death experience and all that, to come in my mid-50s to go on social media and do all this stuff. And it was just natural progression. But I think that is part of midlife. I do believe, and midlife to me isn't an age, it's just an experience. And so we all hit it at different times. It's like someone like, oh, I'm not in midlife. It's just really, to me, it's that time, that point in life when you start waking up and you start realizing, oh my God, this is my life. I can do it my way. I can really look at myself, understand myself, how I got to where I got, make sure I don't go there again. Because if we live unconsciously, like you said, you had so much trauma, but if you didn't wake up, you would keep repeating that and attracting that. But look at, you did this massive pivot to leave everything behind. You literally left with the clothes on your back, and look at all of the things that you have accomplished since then, and accomplished from healing. I don't know, can you say, is there wholehearted healing in there? You talk about being broken and talk about mending. Do you believe that can you ever be fully healed after tremendous trauma like that? Or is it just, you still have the broken places, but they're stronger than ever before in those breaks?
Mm-hmm. Great question. I absolutely believe in full healing, but it doesn't change that it happened. And so I do a lot of EMDR therapy. So that's one part. But the other part is I own my story. I'm not afraid of it anymore. I am who I am. I have on my arm in my own handwriting, Mary Oliver's poem, One Wild and Precious Life. And that's and that's how I remember that I got this one life, and I'm going to live it. I'm going to take the things that happened to me and make them hopefully give them as gifts, right?
You're giving us so many gifts. And I think you say something in the book, you say many, many incredible, profound things, but this feels like to me, what happens at midlife? I needed to purge the wreckage inside of me. Yeah. Each memory felt like a sharp piece of glass that I wanted to dump into the lake. I could feel all the pain in my core. And so I let the memories surface one by one. I have goosebumps everywhere saying that.
I feel emotion about that, because that moment standing on that bridge is when I claimed my life again, And I said, okay, fine. That happened to me, but it doesn't win. It doesn't win. And I get to decide what I want my life to be. And since then, and the work I do with women now in my bee tribes is, let's come up with those patterns, those memories, those things that the unconscious patterns have happened from something from childhood. And you can get to those. We can heal those. We can not just heal, but we can say, that made me who I am, and be proud of that, right? I'm proud to say that I walked through all of that. And I that took me a long time. That was a midlife thing too.
Of course it did. That was, I mean, those words, I can totally relate to that, because in the shards of glass, like, it's painful as it comes up, but it's more painful, and you can die from it being in there forever, right? It starts festering and obsessing and all that stuff. So I love that you share that. And you talk about, like, really a complicated relationship with living at one point, which I think a lot of people can relate to. There are a lot of walking zombies out there who are kind of dying on the inside but don't really know how to live. You realized you didn't want to die, but you weren't really sure how to live. But not anymore.
Not anymore. No. Oh, I love my life now. So how did that happen? Gosh, one day at a time, one moment at a time. Trusting myself, and knowing that I did always have, as a child, I always had a sense and a knowing that I was going to be okay. And no
even through all of that, even through, wow.
And I a couple of things. I always knew I was going to be okay. And I always made it a point to look my dad in the eye. That was the way I could be brave. And it was a small thing, but it was a huge thing for a 9-year-old girl who's about to get hit with a stick to look my dad in the eye. But I did that. And so I think a lot of times it's baby steps to get us where we're going. I say to my bee tribers all the time, my women, I say, just do the next right thing. Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't think, but I'm not there yet. Don't think, where am I going to be in 2 years? Don't do that to yourself. Just do the next right thing. And then the next right thing will present itself, and so on and so forth. And then the next thing you know, you are in love with yourself, and you're in love with the life that you've created.
Climb the mountain one step at a time, don't you? Just bit by bit. And your dad, that obviously was a very complicated relationship. There is a story in the book that is brutal, where your father you believe he's going to kill you. He has a gun pointed at you and tells you that he is going to kill you. So I don't know if you want to get into that and share that at all right now, but I want to talk about forgiveness, because I know you're at Madonna House. He calls you. He's got a plane ticket. He's basically your dad tells you what to do, and you do it, even though you haven't lived at home for a long time. But you stood your ground, and you've never seen him since. Is that correct? But forgiveness, all of that. So I don't know how much you want to get into that story, because it's a crazy story. I don't know many people that had their fathers take a gun and point it at them. How about that whole relationship, and have you made peace with it?
Yes, I am absolutely at peace. Again, took a long time to say. Forgiveness was the greatest gift I gave myself, because it was eating at me. My fear of him, my shame around what he did to me, my anger at him, it was all directed at me. He did. I don't know if he felt it. He's created his own personal hell, I'm sure. I have seen him since I left.
You have? Okay. I thought because it said in there many times you were broken, like complete
Yes.
total break from your family. So you
Yes.
have seen him. I did not know that. So what was that like?
So when I started writing the book, I haven't really talked about this, but when I started writing the book and I had to write these stories, I realized that there was only one thing I needed to say to my dad. And it was a strange thing. It was, I know what you did to me. That was it. I didn't need an apology. Or maybe I did, but that was what I needed to say. So I asked him to go to lunch. Probably 7 years ago, I don't remember exactly. And I said, I know what you did to me. And he said, what? And I couldn't believe it. Like I was stunned. And he said, you were abusive. Well, like what? So that was what came out, was the gun story. I said, you took me for a hike in Lake Powell for hours and told me you were going to kill me and shot gunshots over my head. And his response was, come on, you know I wasn't going to do that. And I said, no 12-year-old girl knows that her father is not going to kill her when he says that he's going to. After he had hit me so hard I fell off the boat, if you remember. So that, I think there is a level of denial in him that is so deep that he can't admit at his age how incredibly difficult that was.
You talk a lot about the somewhere else place, where you lived. I know that place well. Anyone who's had trauma knows that place well. So your grandmother lived there. Your mother lived there. It sounds like your father lived there too.
I guess so. I think my dad's a narcissist, as you said, and he has made himself his own God. So he uses God as a tool to say, I did the right thing, or as some kind of blanket statement of
everything's okay. Everything's okay. I'm the boss. I'm the woman. He seems like he's just disassociated in a different way than you do when you've had trauma, but he seems like he doesn't have a connection to his true self, or lives in, I suppose that's narcissistic. You live in that outward, everything out here. So today you have all these new things you're doing. Talk about Full Circle and tribes and taking women on amazing adventures, in Mexico, and all these things that you're doing. So talk about that. Obviously, it's a huge passion project for you. Bee tribes. I'd love to go. I'd love to go. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I would love to go. So tell me about that and your vision for that and how that all came to be and where you're going. Obviously, we're in COVID. So, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So Be came to be because I want women to be wherever they are. So the Be is in parentheses, and it's be powerful, be worthy, be resilient, be sensual, be sad, be healing, be whatever you are in that moment, and know that you are worthy. And so I started with that concept, and I started putting tribes of women together, 12 to a tribe, and I take them through either a 3-month curriculum or a 6-month curriculum. And it is so transformative. The 3-month curriculum is Be Ignited, and it's all about deep connection to yourself, deep connection to your tribe, and igniting this inner compass that we all have, this native genius that wants to get out. And then the 6-month program is Be Transformed. And we go very deep on patterns that we talked, kind of like we talked about earlier, and transforming those patterns into healthy living and really transforming your life in a profound way. And so I love it so much to see 12 women come together and talk about really, really vulnerably, talk about who they are and their stories. And I mean, it's everyone from, CMOs of publicly traded companies to housewives to a woman on the stock market who, women in the UK, it's anyone. And it's because we all have that story inside that we want told, that we need to be out in the world. And another reason I created it is because of the rungs on the ladder we talked about earlier. There are none. And we need to understand that we are all inside. We are all the teacher and we are all the student. And there are no rungs on the ladder. We are, like I said, let's join hands and go together. And so in our programs, everyone has both the independent relationship with each person on the tribe, because we do things called musings and quests. Musings are things to write about and think about and journal about, and quests are things to do. And each week you get different ones on different topics. And so each week you're working with a partner to go deep on those. And then we come together as a tribe every other week to talk about how we've grown through those. So by the end of the 3 months, you've worked with every woman individually at a deep core level, and you've also got your tribe. And it's been years since I started, but in our first tribe, they still have a call on Sunday nights at 5:00. Still, years later. And it's just so beautiful to watch that camaraderie and that beauty that happens when women gather and tell their story.
So that's so wonderful. I love that you used, one of my favorite not just words, but transformation, because transformation is very different than change. We're always changing our lives, but we change them and they go back. We change them and they go back, but transformation is permanent. It's this, switch that you flip inside and you don't go back. So that's at a different place of consciousness and intention, and you're redirecting your life, and you have redirected it clearly so incredibly beautifully. I love what you're doing. I love the mission that you're doing. And there was a question that I had for you from that. What was it? This morning I'm an insomniac at menopause, whatever. So, menopause, I'm like on the sofa over there at 4 a.m. with listening to Insight Timer and your beautiful meditation. Oh my God!
Oh,
so it's great. You're just beautiful, beautiful voice, beautiful stories. Just I love what you're doing, and I find it fascinating that you grew up in a religious cult. You go to, Madonna, that's another Catholic thing. But now you really have, talk about another full circle. I don't even know if you call it full circle. Maybe it's the infinity there, that you are now in a different circle, really a spiritual. So you have a different relationship with God, higher power, divine, whatever you want to call it. So what is that, and how did you find, after all of that? There's this scene in there with Marion where she's like challenging God, and at the end of Madonna House, which I've had many of those moments, oh my God. But what is your relationship now, and how did you find that beautiful peace with this higher power out there?
Yeah. Well, I really, religion isn't really for me. I'm not against it or anything. It's just, I can't have someone else tell me what the rules are. I had that too much of my life. With my upbringing. And so I feel like this spirituality, like this spiritual awakening, really. And I think a lot of women are going through it, where we say, I have the power to create the life I want and have the relationship with my God that I want. And for me, she's feminine, right?
Mm-hmm. And I say, that's so funny. That's what I always say when people say about God. I'm like, yes, she. She's a badass. She's fierce.
She's a badass, and
badass.
She, it's like Mary Magdalene, she was a badass, right? And I love that. And the spirituality side, I started doing meditative yoga 10 years ago, and it's done with your eyes closed for an hour and a half. And it's so incredible. And that got me into meditation, and I have my sadhana group and we do it together. And I feel like that gave me the internal look at myself. And so when I started writing, I started saying, oh, the meditations. And thank you for listening on Insight Timer, because it just went live.
I loved it.
A few days ago. So I was thrilled to be a teacher on Insight Timer. It's such a great app. And so I started writing them and saying, I want to give that gift to people, like building the sanctuary. That's one of them. I don't know which one you listen to, but we should all have
sanctuary, the inner sanctuary. Yes, that's exactly what it was. Yeah, it's beautiful.
We should all have that place that in one breath we can go and we know we're safe. So that's what I wanted people to take away from that one.
Amazing, and the power of the breath. And here you have a set of twins. You have three kids right now. And I think the last interview I saw, they hadn't read your book. Is that right? Or is it still the case? Is there? How's that? There's a complicated relationship. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Are they not ready? Is it just one of those things that are? You
definitely picked up on an intuition right there. I had lunch with my almost 21-year-old on Sunday with his dad and I, and my rule was they couldn't read it until they were 18. Well, he's almost 21, and he turned to me and he said, "Mom, I'm ready to read your book." And my first thought was, "Oh no!" And my second thought was, "Yay!" Right? And so I said, "Why? Why now?" And he said, "I want to see where you were at my age, because it gives me hope, because I know who you are. So I just want to see." Because I think everyone, especially with all the craziness in our world, he's saying, what is this life thing about? Who do I want to be when I grow up? Right? And so I'm thrilled. That was just Sunday, so we'll see. He wanted to listen to it because it's in my voice. I narrated it. And so I'm really interested to see how he feels about it and what he does with that. So
special. I can't wait to hear how that all comes out. I imagine it will be very difficult, but also talk about building this connection with you, understanding you on a whole different level when you put your mom's my age and she's dealing with these things, and look where she is now.
Right.
So, and look where she is now. Let's talk about Jane Goodall. Sorry, I have to bring that in there. I mean, you have had the most fascinating life from someone who came from where you came from and overcame so many things and have built this empire and tribes and all these amazing things, giving back and microloans and helping women find their voices all around the world. Jane Goodall, I mean, I'm just like, oh my God, I have dreamt of like meeting her one day. How did that happen? And you've got a big project out there with her.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. She sprinkles fairy dust everywhere she goes. It's amazing. The Jane dust. She just has, you know when you met someone special, she is just she's out of this world special. She's ethereal in some way. But so I met her because they invited her to come to our home for dinner, which now seems like such a brave thing to do because who was I to think that she would come? But she came, and we had a beautiful connection, a really, really meaningful connection. And I'm not a big gala girl, although I do love my nice shoes. But she came and we did something unique. We only had about 12 people to dinner, and we did it outside. And she just got to connect with people, and we funded it separately so that we funded it with those people. Sorry, I said that wrong. We funded it with those people, but we had her for 12 hours. And most of the hours, we just let her walk around. We had her walk around Boulder, which is where I live, Boulder, Colorado. People mistook her for Diana Fossey. But and we took her to schools to talk. And we took her to inside of a company. She talked to one of the big company, and a small company in Boulder. And it was just personal. We just talked. And that felt amazing. And so by the time the night ended, whenever all the guests were gone, she said, "Come on, Keele, we're going to go drink some scotch in your writing studio." And I thought, okay, that sounds great. And we got to telling how important stories are. And I got the courage to tell her that I was trying to write a book. And she said, "I want to read it." So she read she read the first draft of Wholly Unraveled and the subsequent, and she loved it. And I thought, if she said that, then maybe I'm onto something here, and she gives that hope to so many across the planet. And so I went on the road with her for a while, and it's amazing to even talk about, because I spent about a year and a half or two, I went to Gambia with her. I sat with the chimps with her. Africa, I got to interview her son and her beautiful grandchildren, and I got to see her homes and stay with her. And, it was just, I feel privileged to have been able to do that. And wow. She's ready to tell her story. And we all have that, the stories we don't want to say out loud. And we do. Yeah.
So you have clearly spun some gold out of things that were not so pretty to begin with. And we have a lot of women out there right now. Women, all over the world, women at midlife and beyond, many that have had pretty challenging experiences. Could be childhood, but a lot of people late in life, be it life-threatening illnesses or losing partners, like especially right now with COVID. Absolutely. What advice would you give them right now to not lose hope, to keep, those dreams are in their heart, right? They're there for a reason, and they're living, breathing beings, and you can make anything happen. You are someone who has made magic happen. So what would you say to them?
First of all, I would say ditto to you, because you are making magical things happen as well. Yes, I really mean that from my heart. It's so wonderful to see you do that special work that you're doing. And I think it is what we talked about is do the next thing, like find out what your dream is. And don't forget what's on my arm. One wild and precious life is what we get. And what do you want from that? And take those baby steps towards it. Because you and I didn't start here, right? Absolutely not. If you read the book. But we get to go where we want to go. So if you can define, it's what I do with my work with bee tribes. It's where do you want to go? And let's help each other get there. That's what I would say.
Let's help each other. Let's link arms and, like you said, peer to peer, side to side. So, Keele, I think you are fabulous, and I cannot wait to meet you in person. It is going to happen where can people find you? Where can people find your brilliant book? Obviously, we will link it. We will share it. But if they want to be part of Bee Tribes, if they want to work with you in any capacity, if they want to, go on some adventures, I know you Mexico, all these wonderful things with the tribes, how can they do that?
Yeah, so the first place would be to look for me on beetribes.com, and it's just the letter B. So BTRIBES.com, and you can submit there, and I make sure I read all of them, which I love doing. I love hearing from my readers. It's really, really important to me to hear from my readers. And so that's the website, and then you can find the book anywhere you can find books: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Audible, and it's
your
my
voice. Yeah, exactly, your voice. So wonderful.
Which I auditioned for, which was funny.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, right? Like you got cast for your voice. Yeah. So you are wonderful. You guys get the book. I highly recommend Wholly Unraveled. And thank you so much. It was a delight, like starting the day with Inside Timer. Check out Keele on Inside Timer as well. And thank you so much for being with us. You're precious. One precious and wild life. Cheers, beauties. Thank you for being with us. If you love the show, please share it. And please subscribe and share it with your friends. And go check out Bee Tribes and Wholly Unraveled. All right. With that, cheers, beauties. Stay fierce.